Hi guys, welcome to this video on Act 4, Scene 2 from Macbeth. And in this scene, we're going to see the murder of Lady Macduff and her children at the hands of Macbeth's assassins. But before the assassins arrive, we see a conversation between Lady Macduff and her son about his father, Macduff, now being a traitor. And she explains to him that he has gone to England and that he won't be coming back. She says that he is dead. Because now that he's petitioning an army from Malcolm to come and to try and overthrow Macbeth, he is now a traitor. So in this way, the scene explores ideas around betrayal and treason, and certainly attitudes towards treason. But at the same time, because of the violent and bloody murder of Lady Macduff and her children, we see a further decline in Macbeth's honour and bravery through his changing methods of murder. So far, we've seen him killing on the battlefield, we've seen him murdering Duncan Sleep, we've seen him send assassins to kill Banquo. He is now sending assassins to kill women and children. This is kind of seen as the most dishonourable act, or at least one of the most dishonourable acts that Macbeth commits within this play. But before we go through the annotation, let's listen to the scene.
What had he done to make him fly the land?
You must have patience, madam.
He had none. His flight was madness. And what our actions do not, our fears do make us traitors.
You know not whether it was his wisdom or his fear.
Wisdom? To leave his wife? To leave his babes, his mansion, and his titles? In a place from whence himself does fly. He loves us not. He wants the natural touch. For the poor wren, the most diminutive of birds, will fight her loved ones in her nest against the owl. All is the fear and nothing is the love. As little is the wisdom when the flight so runs against all reason.
My dearest coz, I pray you, school yourself. But for your husband, he is noble, wise, judicious, and best knows the fits of the season. I dare not speak much further. But cruel are the times when we are traitors and do not know ourselves. When we hold rumour from what we fear, yet know not what we fear, but float upon a wild and violent sea, each way, and move. I take my leave of you. It shall not be long ere I'll be here again. Things, at the worst, will cease, or else climb upward to what they were before. My pretty cousin, blessing upon you.
Fathered he is, and yet he's fatherless.
I am so much a fool should I stay longer. It will be my disgrace and your discomfort. I take my leave. At once.
Sirrah. Your father's dead. And what will you do now? How will you live?
As birds do, Mother. My father's not dead for all you're saying.
Yes, he is dead. How wilt thou do for a father?
Nay, how will you do for a husband?
Why, I can buy me 20 at any market.
Was my father a traitor, Mother?
Aye, that he was.
What is a traitor?
Why, one that swears and lies.
And be all traitors that do so?
Everyone that does so is a traitor and must be hanged.
And must they all be hanged that swear and lie?
Everyone.
Who must hang them?
Why, the honest men.
Then the liars and swears are fools. For there are liars and swears enough to beat the honest men and hang up them.
Now God help thee, poor monkey.
I doubt some danger does approach you nearly. Be not found here. Hence with your little ones. To fright you thus, methinks I am too savage. To do worse to you a fell cruelty which is too nigh your person. Heaven preserve you. I dare abide no longer.
Oh, whither should I fly? I have done no harm. But I remember now. I am in this earthly world, where to do harm is often laudable. To do good, sometime accounted dangerous folly. Why then, alas, do I put up that womanly defense, to say I have done no harm?
Where's your husband?
I hope in no place so unsanctified where such as thou mayst find him.
He's a traitor.
Thou lie, thou-shagged villain!
What? You, eh? Huh?
He has killed me, Mother. Run away, I pray you.
Okay, so let's have a look at some of this annotation. So we begin with Lady Macduff talking to Ross. They're discussing Macduff going to England and why he's done that. So Lady Macduff asks, what had he done to make him fly the land? So just this image of him flying the land talks of Macduff leaving in haste, that he's gone and he hasn't really explained himself. She then says his flight was madness, so showing that she disagrees with him leaving. She's not quite aware of why he's gone, and she's got, a problem with this. She says, when our actions do not, our fears do make us traitors. So she's worried here that him behaving in this nervous and scared manner is going to make someone think that he's a traitor. And is she talking about her fears of Macbeth? Or her own fears of suspicion? She's worried that by acting in this way, Macduff is casting shade on her and her family, and that someone might become suspicious as to why Macduff, isn't there. We then see Ross using some equivocation to describe what, he thinks is the cause of Macduff's leaving so quickly. He says whether it was his wisdom or his fear. So this idea that whether it's because he's so scared for himself, or whether it's because he's wise enough, to make the right call to go get an army to overthrow Macbeth. His wife then responds with wisdom to leave his wife, to leave his babes, his mansion and his titles in a place from whence himself does fly. Now this is interesting, she evokes here a reference to the patriarchy, discussing the idea of male protection, that Macduff should be there to protect his wife and his babes, because in presenting it that way, she shows that they are vulnerable, in the same way that Macbeth uses wife and babes, where Macbeth says, give to the edge of the sword his wife, his babes, and all unfortunate souls that trace him in his line. By echoing Macbeth there, she shows, like I say, that she is vulnerable and that she needs Macduff there for his male protection. She then evokes an image of birds to describe herself protecting her children. And remember, Shakespeare uses birds throughout this play because people within the Jacobean era held certain significance to certain birds. And in this, she evokes the image of a wren. She says, for the poor wren, the most diminutive of birds, will fight her young ones in her nest against the owl. So a wren was a bird that was seen as active, a bird that would take action, and a bird that was linked with the idea of watchfulness. So in this way, she's saying, that she is watchful for her children, she cares for her children, and she makes sure that she's ready to take action to protect her children. However, she also describes the wren as diminutive, indicating some sort of weakness. Now, is she saying here that she recognises that she is weak, but even though she is weak, she will fight against the owl? A bird seen as very strong, a bird that is predatory, and that feasts on weaker creatures. So in this way, she's saying that she's ready to protect her own children. However, Macduff clearly isn't, because he's gone off. We then have Ross using imagery to describe the character of Macduff. This is a character we don't know very much about, and he doesn't really have very much of a history within this play. So in this very short speech, we see a lot of details around Macduff. Ross says that Macduff is noble, wise, judicious, and best knows the fits of the season. So, this opinion of Macduff right now runs contrary to the opinion of Macbeth. At the same time, Ross says Macduff understands the fits of the season. Fits being irrational and violent, but also linking to the idea of the mood of the times. This very much indicating that life at the moment is rather irrational and violent. Also, foreshadowing the violence that's going to come at the end of this scene. This backed up by Ross saying, "But cruel are the times when we are traitors and do not know ourselves." The idea that the times are cruel links with irrational violence. But again here, he uses equivocation to try and understand what is happening in Scotland at the moment. He says, "Cruel are the times when we are traitors and do not know ourselves." So saying that it's horrible when we are traitors but don't even know that we are committing treason. He says, "When we hold rumour from what we fear, yet know not what we fear." The idea that people are spreading rumour based on the things that they're afraid of, but they don't quite fully understand what it is they are afraid of. You think of all of the unnatural imagery, all of the things that have been happening that would cause fear within the people. They don't yet know the root cause of all of these things. Things like Duncan's horses eating each other, things like stones talking, birds being awake at night, all that kind of stuff. We then once more have a slight reference to the witches and the spells that they can cast. He says, "But float upon a wild and violent sea, each way and none." So, just that wild and violent sea, that might be a slight reference to the witches and their controlling of weather. I also like to think of this as another reference to the use of water to indicate time within the play. Macbeth going from that bank and shoal of time, wading deeper, and now they're right in the wild and violent sea. This progress to the depths of bloodshed has gone on and on and on. And then he ends with a reference to the cycles of violence. This idea that there will always be a king who is betrayed and violence will ensue, and then a war will happen, and then there will be peace once there is a new king, and then he will be betrayed, and so on and so on and so on. And this cycle of violence will just continue and continue and continue. He says, "Things at the worst will cease, or else climb upward to what they were before." He's saying here that the worst excesses of Macbeth's nature will either end through bloodshed, through an army coming to take that from Macbeth, that will just end abruptly, or else climb upward to what they were before, or Macbeth will improve and will have that period of peace that is due after a period of bloodshed. Note though, the verb climb within this. Climb indicates that would be a struggle, that is going to be quite an effort, considering where Macbeth is right now. Now, interestingly, through all these descriptions of Macduff, we see Macduff as being a foil to Macbeth. A foil within a play or a text is a contrasting character. Macduff is presented as being the exact opposite of Macbeth. Within this way, he is shown to be placing his country over his family. He recognises that by leaving them, it's really, really dangerous. And that by leaving them, he'll be seen as a traitor, and also that it will kind of sever some of those connections within his family. But he feels that by going to England to petition Malcolm, he will be doing the right thing for his country. And this is the exact opposite of Macbeth. Macbeth chooses to further his own family over his country. By murdering Duncan, he and Lady Macbeth become royalty. However, that isn't the right thing for the country, and it certainly doesn't fit in with God's great plan, that idea of the great chain of being. Also, we see that Macduff is wise to leave Scotland. He knows that if he stays around, he's going to end up the same way as Banquo. He's had his suspicions from the very first. If we think back to Act 2, Scene 3, where we see Macduff's reaction to Macbeth killing Duncan's guards, Macduff says, "Wherefore did you so?" Wherefore meaning why. So, in that scene, in asking Macbeth why he did this, he's the first person within the play to question any of Macbeth's violence. And so from the off, we see that there's going to be conflict between Macduff and Macbeth. So just bear in mind that idea that Macduff is a foil to Macbeth. He is that contrasting character that represents the opposite set of values to Macbeth. We then see Lady Macduff using some equivocation when referring to her son. She says to Ross, "Fathered he is, and yet he's fatherless." Fathered in that he used to have a dad, he used to have Macduff, but now that Macduff has gone, he's fatherless. Ross then leaves, and we see this conversation play out between Lady Macduff and her son. She says to her son, "Sirrah, your father's dead." This is the first thing that she says to her son. Now, there are a couple of ways you could take this. So, does she mean literally? The idea that if Macduff were to come back to Scotland, he would surely be executed. Macbeth knows that he is a traitor, or at least believes that he is a traitor. And so if Macduff returned to his family, he'd definitely be killed. Does she mean this metaphorically? The idea that in going to England, Macduff has kind of handed over his power within Scotland. He can no longer claim his lands. He will no longer be a thane. So, power-wise, influence-wise, he's metaphorically dead. Could this also be a reference to the family? The idea that in leaving, he is now dead to her. He's left her in this risky situation where she's got to protect her own children. And in leaving them, he's kind of given up that fatherly role. Therefore, he's dead to the family. She asks her son, "How will you live, now that your father's dead?" And her son quite cheekily replies, "As birds do, mother." She says, "What with worms and flies?" And he responds with, "What I get, I mean, and so do they." This idea that, he's just going to get whatever he can get. She then continues this extended metaphor of him being a bird by saying, "Poor bird, thou'dst never fear the net, nor line, the pitfall nor the gin." Now, net, line, pitfall and gin, these are all methods of entrapping birds. These are ways of catching birds. And in saying this, she maybe foreshadows some of the entrapment that she's going to face. This idea that kind of she is trapped within the house. But at the same time, this foreshadows the idea of predation, that people would prey on birds and ultimately death. The son then says he doesn't believe her. He says, "My father is not dead for all you're saying," which she replies, "Yes, he is dead." "How wilt thou do for a father?" Now, this is a really interesting response, and again, quite cheeky. The son says, "Nay, how will you do for a husband?" So his concern isn't that he isn't going to have a father, it's that she needs to worry that she hasn't got a husband anymore. Now, this talks directly about ideas to do with the patriarchy, and particularly at this time, if you were a noble woman and your husband died or left or disappeared, then you wouldn't have a claim on the things that were his. It would go to the next person in line. Now, this question, "How will you do for a husband?" talks about him recognising that if Macduff really is dead, as she says, then Lady Macduff is going to experience a loss of power and wealth. She's going to be out on her ear, basically. She replies, "Why, I can buy me 20 at any market," showing that she feels that she can just easily find a new husband. The son says, "Then you'll buy him to sell him again," because she will have been tricked. Any man that would sell himself to her would be tricking her to try and get hold of some of that wealth and some of that power that she would be entitled to if she had a husband. We then have a little bit of an extended conversation around the nature of treason. He asks, "Was my father a traitor, mother?" And she responds, "Aye, that he was." He asks, "What is a traitor?" This opens up this conversation around what is treason and who can decide what treason and treachery is. We then see some of Lady Macduff's ideas around the punishment of traitors. She replies to her son that a traitor is one that swears and lies, and then says everyone that does so is a traitor and must be hanged. This idea that anyone that is a traitor must be killed. The son asks, "Who must hang them?" Lady Macduff replies, "Why, the honest men." Now, this leads to quite an interesting insight from the son. He says, "Then the liars and swearers are fools, for there are liars and swearers enough to beat the honest men and hang them up." So in this way, the son is saying that he sees lots of dishonest men more than the honest ones. That the world is filled with more dishonest people. So if the dishonest people rose up and overthrew the honest ones, they could murder them. Now think about how this reflects the events of the play. He says, "For there are liars and swearers enough." This is a reference to Macbeth. Macbeth is one of these liars and swearers. Macbeth has lied to Duncan and sworn to protect Duncan. So by saying that these liars and swearers could rise up and overthrow the honest, such as Duncan, he's kind of showing that he understands what's happening within this play. It also implies that treason only applies to the minority of losers, that there are plenty of these liars and swearers who aren't caught, and plenty of these people who are committing treason that just go about their lives quite freely. It's only the ones that reach too far that end up, in the crosshairs of people wishing to punish treason. It's also worthwhile noting this word enough, that has a lot of links around Macbeth, but also is linked to Macduff. It's one of the words that is used within the fight between Macbeth and Macduff at the end. Also worth noticing that the son uses prose when giving this response to his mother. Now, this use of prose could reflect the honesty of his words, because there's a lot of honesty within this, particularly in the modern age. People seem to get away with lying and betraying people on a very regular basis, so we can't think that things have changed that much. But at the same time, this use of prose brings the character of the son closer to the audience. Lady Macduff then belittles his ideas, calling him poor monkey. But at the same time, this is natural of a mother. And she is presented as a very natural motherly figure. She says that she is willing to defend her children. Now consider how this puts her up as a foil to Lady Macbeth. She's the opposite of that character. Lady Macbeth said that she would murder her own children to become queen. Now, Lady Macduff clearly would not do that. The son then continues the conversation about Macduff being dead, saying if he were dead, you'd weep for him. If you would not, it were a good sign that I should quickly have a new father. So this idea that if Lady Macduff didn't cry at the death of Macduff, that she had a replacement lined up, there was a man that she was going to bring into the house. But, this also backs up the idea that he's quite cheeky for a son. Then, in a sudden change to the scene, a messenger arrives with a warning. He says some danger does approach, telling Lady Macduff that she needs to leave with her children now. She questions, whither should I fly? So where should I go? I've done no harm, but I remember now I am in this earthly world where to do harm is often laudable. She says here to do harm is often laudable, meaning that violence is celebrated. To do good sometime accounted dangerous folly. This idea that good deeds are seen as dangerous. All of this is kind of equivocation again, to say that harm is celebrated and good is dangerous, and all of it again links with the idea of fair is foul and foul is fair. The idea that fortune and betrayal within this play all exist within this grey area where nothing can really be predicted about the way that people are going to behave. She says, alas, do I put up that womanly defence to say I have done no harm? This idea that her gender allows her to say, it wasn't me, I didn't do anything, and she should be able to get away with it. Then the murderers arrive and kill both her son and her. We've got the murderer refer to the son as young fry of treachery, in which he calls him the son of a traitor, and then finally the murderer kills him. And I've said this before, but we must consider how has Macbeth's violence changed here. This is him killing women and children. This marks the very depths of Macbeth's descent into madness and violence. To kill women and children would be seen as the most dishonourable act that you could commit. So now, in the eyes of a Jacobean audience, Macbeth is completely degraded. However, Shakespeare chooses to keep Macbeth at a distance from these murders, helping to try to maintain some sort of sympathy for Macbeth, because at the end of the play you could argue that there is some form of redemption arc with that character. However, just finally to note that there is no heroic couplet at the end of this scene. There was a lot of very disordered speech, and I think that both of these things together point out that what has been committed here is a truly despicable act. Okay, so that's Act 4, Scene 2. I hope you found that useful. I'll speak to you again soon. Bye bye.